I very legitimately thought that our business was unacquirable. Stripe just pours jet fuel on the business and accelerates us at a pace that would be completely impossible independently.
I think it will be taught differently in schools, people who went through universities, because I think they're learning a lot of skills that are irrelevant.
What would you recommend they study instead then?
Drop out and build a business.
Probably a lot of people here have interacted with a product that you created, Sean. You designed USDC years ago, back when it was far from obvious that it would be a good idea. It was a zero interest rate environment. There was no business model for it. What gave you the conviction to think that USDC could work?
It probably should have been obvious sooner than 2017, which was when I wrote the first white paper and began writing the code. We started Circle in 2013, so probably should have been more obvious at that point. At that point, we had firm conviction over, on this concept of democratizing access to finance globally on internet rails. But we started with Bitcoin, and then sort of realized that what we really need is a representation of government fiat money that could be trusted but run at internet speed. And that led us to put the dollar first on Ethereum rails, but the concept was always many, many chains, many issuers, and to open up this new world of money running at internet speed. And so that was sort of rooted in the origins of the company, but for USDC specifically, it was just a mission to make that reality.
So why now? Why are stablecoins having their moment now? When you worked on this, years ago, you had the idea for it, and now it's really taking off. What's changed?
Well, it was a really hard problem to start with because it wasn't really fundamentally a technical hard problem. The infrastructure was not quite mature enough to have, say, dollars or other currencies, but mostly when we talk about stablecoins today, we're talking about dollars in volume. The infrastructure wasn't quite there, but still the key problem was not the technical one. It was more related to the regulatory hurdles that needed to be cleared, the kind of partners and distribution that needed to be amassed around it, and those sorts of elements. So we didn't shy away from a hard problem. I mean, we knew that this needed to ultimately be encoded in law, but that takes some time. And so we devoted a lot of time to just going in and educating regulators and explaining how this could work. There were elements on the economic side, elements of the Chicago plan, which is this notion that money creation should be separate from lending markets, and stablecoins effectively put that into play. And so we sort of had these conversations, but it was always going to be a long-term sort of playbook to run. At the time, the interest rates were very, very low, and so conversations with people like Balaji, for instance, who helped us at Coinbase, really sort of imagine this as something that might take 10 years to really result in something that might be a credible business model. Thankfully, it was faster than that. Yeah, that's a little bit of the picture.
I mean, I was at Coinbase when we were working with you on USDC, and it kind of was like a science experiment. No one knew what the business was or how it was going to be used. And it's hard to even put ourselves back in that point, but there was DeFi really wasn't that much of a thing. People were kind of buying crypto kitties. Was maybe that had come along, maybe not even at that moment in time. So it was the entirety of the ecosystem was so nascent, and much of the ecosystem kind of evolved around stablecoins over the subsequent 6-7 years.
So it was pretty counter trend to be doing this so early.
Well, I would say even in Circle, there was some support for it, but there was not a lot of support for developing USDC at the time. We were doing many things.
When I first met you,
JR supported it. JR supports everything, my co-founder. But it was a tiny team with not a lot of resources, which played to our benefit, I think, in being able to execute.
Yeah, when I first met you and was covering, crypto for Fortune magazine, I did for years. You guys were working on a Bitcoin-powered sort of Venmo competitor. It got some traction in Europe.
We had many things. We had this conviction around what the world of global finance might look like on internet rails, but we were very flexible in how it might actually be achieved, particularly in the near term, when we were sort of struggling to get, we were pursuing money transmission licenses in the United States. So getting states even to understand what this was, and while we might need to be licensed, at the same time that we had several product experiments that we were working with. And so we did start with Bitcoin, and then obviously moved to Ethereum, which is where we launched USDC and many others, fairly agnostic about what the underlying rails, needed to be, with some specific characteristics that are helpful, obviously. But it was always a little bit the layer on top, the programmable money layer operating across multiple chains that was of most interest. Yeah.
I have to share one story. I came to your offices in 2017, and I arrived on a day when the markets just completely tanked.
You have to be more specific.
It was a bloodbath, which in retrospect looks extremely tiny. Like Bitcoin was trading at 20,000, it probably went down to like 6,000 over the course of a month. And I expected you guys to cancel the visit, and because it was just going to be like a shit show or something. And I showed up, and you guys were cool as cucumbers. Like there was no frenzy going on in the office, and you were like, well, we've got this OTC trading desk, so as long as the price is moving, we're making money hand over fist.
Well, it's also by that 2017, just 4 or 5 years in, there's many little mini crises along the way. I remember when we struggled to get a banking partner. We had one bank that would bank us, and I was doing a panel for Silicon Valley Bank, which is the one bank that would bank us in the world, the night that the news broke about Mt. Gox, and we had bankers walking out of the room swiftly. So there's lots of little mini incidents like that. But have conviction about something, stay resilient, and manage to stay alive long enough to be successful with it.
I want to talk about those hard times, but first I have to ask you, Zach, also, you had your own journey through the idea maze. You started the company, Bridge, relating to NFTs, and you since had pivoted to stablecoins. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, it was shorter than Circle's journey. It's kind of the Circle story is an amazing. It was 4 or 5 years of kind of like exploration to sort of find what ended up becoming the business that then like carried it forward. For us, the journey was about a year. We started in 2022 when NFTs were taking off, and we wanted to enable people to buy NFTs with their bank account, and we were like taking money out of the bank account, converting it into stablecoins, and then enabling people to acquire NFTs. And it turned out that was not the best idea. But in the course of building that business, we realized how hard it was to actually build with stablecoins, and it took us some time. And then but between that moment and over the course of the summer, we built a lot of conviction that stablecoins could be this like core payment infrastructure, and somebody needed to decomplexify, the process of connecting, a bank account or the fiat infrastructure to this emergent stablecoin infrastructure. But even from then, it was like this meandering path of, fear that we we're either too early or heading down the wrong path, or even as we acquire customers, I think maybe 2 years in, 3 years in, we were still questioning whether we had product market fit. I don't know when, I'm curious, when Circle felt like, stablecoins had product market fit. Because, there was a lot of usage, but there was no business. So that's probably not product market fit. Now you probably feel that way now that the company has gone public.
Yeah, kind of my somewhat provocative view on this is, I think to date, and in some ways you could still say it's early days, but to date, I would assert that the only thing that has found meaningful PM fit in crypto is stablecoins, because I don't consider assets or exchanges products. So I know people disagree with that.
That's
but it wasn't. It was definitely not the case immediately. It did take some time, and so the largest stablecoin in the world has a real liquidity moat on central exchanges in crypto capital markets, and USDC's liquidity moat developed through DeFi. And so that wasn't early on. It sort of happened, I'd say, really started to accelerate in 2020. And then grew from there. And I think the biggest moat, now that the regulatory hurdle is it's still a hurdle, but it's defined how to actually clear the hurdle. I think the big hurdles that remain for stablecoin adoption are the liquidity moat, and then there's an interoperability question as well. And so it's very difficult to imagine right now, unless something significant changes, another dollar stablecoin clearing that moat in crypto capital markets with the way things currently sit. So minority take maybe, but that's my view.
I think that I think there will be many different stablecoins. I don't know how many will break that moat, but I don't think a lot of them will need to.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll see, anywhere that you can account for something on a ledger. Your number in your Oracle database is a traditional, finance company. Why not tokenize that? And so I think we'll see thousands of different variations of tokenized deposits and stables. But I do think there will probably be a handful that matter, and those will be the ones that clear the liquidity moat, really outside crypto capital markets and payment use cases and all the things that we've been talking about for years, but still haven't really become dominant use cases for stables. But we're this close now. I've said that for like 7 years. We're close, but now it's really true. So
I feel like yes, we are really close, but like we're still so it's hard to even begin to express how early we are still. Like I think now, like looking at this moment of like, okay, there's a public company or what have you, it feels like maybe we're at like the beginning of some like linear or like consistent growth instead of like the chaoticness that has happened over the last like several years. But like the regulatory requirements have still not been defined. Stablecoins are still used in a tiny sliver of all global payments, like a couple basis points of global payments. Stablecoins have captured like a de minimis amount of the overall depository, deposits in the U.S. We don't have any stablecoins that exist really in any material way outside U.S. dollar stablecoins. Most banks and core financial institutions don't touch it in any capacity. So we're still, and blockchains themselves haven't even been, optimized to, facilitate payments at the scale that we need.
Yeah.
It's just so many things. We're like so incredibly early.
Yeah, I agree.
So Sean, you mentioned that you expect there to be multiple stablecoins out there. Tether and Circle have had the first mover advantage, and they account for almost the entirety of the market to date. What do you expect to happen to that status quo? Will it hold?
Well, I don't have any, as you would imagine, I have zero special insight into other, people's strategies behind closed doors. But I do think when we're talking about stablecoin usage today, or we see the transaction volume increase, and it's still largely in crypto capital markets use cases today. We are seeing legitimate cross-border payment use cases, sort of remittance style use cases, import-export, payouts to humans who want to hold dollars on their phones, and stables are the best way to do that. And so we are seeing these use cases, but not yet at volume. And so mostly when we sort of orient toward the state of affairs today, it's still consistently toward crypto capital markets. But the more interesting thing is once we get out of just that one use case and we start to crack these other use cases, there are new players who have different kinds of distribution channels and different kinds of capabilities with bridging partnerships and the like that I think we'll see. We'll see new kinds of stable coins, existing stables as well, but we'll see new kinds of stable coins crack new markets in ways that will be quite different and powerful. So that I'm optimistic about. Everyone has a slightly different take on it. I think some people who are focused on stables focus a little more on the underlying assets and reinvestment of those. Others are very product focused. Some have stumbled into stables, and those are the people I kind of like the most to talk to. Those are the ones who hate the word stablecoin. Why do we call it that? They call it dollar.
Dollar.
It's it's like a streaming dollar or something.
That's a worse name for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if we keep calling these things stablecoins. On ours, with this new venture, we've mostly been interacting with AI engineers and AI companies, and for the longest time we avoided the word because it got such a toxic reaction. And by the way, I think of Circle as maybe the most boring company in crypto in a good way. Very by the book, go through the front door. But we were sort of, the word stablecoin was lumped into crypto, and AI engineer communities, for some reason, my impression is that even more so than other developer communities, have a really strong adverse reaction to crypto. It's changed over the summer, and now stablecoins in particular have achieved some escape velocity relative to their impression of the rest of crypto. But it's been interesting. So anyway, it's a little tangent on the word. I don't know if we keep calling it that, but it seems to be the brand now. So
I think it's done. But you can keep fighting the fight. Yeah.
Don't call it a stablecoin, just call it a dollar. Zach, okay, so I'd like to return to the point about product market fit. We've got an audience of founders here who are probably very interested to know how you grinded your way there and when you knew that you had finally achieved it.
Yeah, I would say that I guess the advice that I got or the way that people kind of talked about their products was that when like you would listen to someone on a podcast or you would talk to an investor or something, there's kind of like people talk about this moment of like your pre-product market fit and then your post-product market fit. And that makes it sound like, you're in the desert and then you're, in some sort of utopia. Or, you're sort of meandering down some like terrible road and then there's this giant cliff that you overcome and then you're on this whole new like plane. And that was definitely not the situation that we experienced. Like we came up sort of with the current, the first version of Bridge. And then we, built our APIs and we launched our APIs, and that didn't feel like product market fit. And then we got one customer, and they were using us, but we had no idea how big they were going to get, so that didn't feel like product market fit. And then we got like 5 customers, and each month we had this like steady inbound of customers that were coming to us, but there were all these like teams across LATAM and Africa, and like who knows how big those customers are going to get. So that didn't feel like product market fit. And then we got to like $1 million of revenue, but I looked at our customer base and I was like, this is a wild collection of like really oddballs, and so I have no idea if I could build a business around this. So that didn't feel like product market fit. And then we raised our Series A, and that just created more fear that we didn't have product market fit. And then I went to like a founder event kind of like this, and I was listening to the CEO of, I think it was like MongoDB or something, talk about how they had gone public and they had about $100 million of revenue, but Amazon had just launched this product, and the whole market knew that Amazon was going to cannibalize their entire business, but then they were looking at their business and they were like, oh, we have this little thing that's like $1 million of revenue today that's going to be really big. And they went public and they ate glass, and then over the next couple years, their core business basically went almost to nothing, and this little thing became like $1 billion business. And it made me realize that as like a founder, a company at that scale that was going public was still iterating through the same stuff that, obviously at a different scale, that we were iterating through. And it made me realize that like the correct mental model of building a company is more like you're kind of just on a Stairmaster, and there's always the next hurdle. It's not like one unified thing where you achieve product market fit and everything changes. It's just a steady, you get to 1 million and how do you get to 5? And then you get to 1 million users and how do you get to 5 million users? And it's just the next milestone, and each one is harder to overcome than the next one, but you're just perpetually on this like journey of trying to overcome what the next obstacle is, with each one feeling like it was harder than the one preceding it, and each one feeling like it's more existential than the one that preceded it. And weirdly, that can sound like masochistic, but it helped me, because then it made me realize that like the insecurity that I was feeling around whether or not we had product market fit was like, because I was like hoping that I would feel a certain sort of way when we achieved product market fit, and not feeling it made me feel fear that wasn't the case. And this made me realize, no, the journey is just going to be this steady thing. And even today, as part of Stripe, I still feel like we're on that journey. Like I still feel like, oh, we achieved, X, this amount of volume, but how are we going to get there? And oh, if we want to be like really important infrastructure, we need to go work with all these types of companies, but we have no product market fit in that segment, and so on. So that's been my experience of it, just a perpetual motion machine of fear and obstacles and overcoming them.
So there's no easy path out. It's just uphill the whole time.
No, I mean maybe. I think it's one of these things where you look back at companies. This is the other thing from my perspective is I had joined a lot of companies that ended up being successful. Like I was at Square pretty early, and Coinbase pretty early, and Brex pretty early. And when I joined all those companies, I felt like they were inevitable, that the companies were going to inevitably be successful. And so that made me feel like there would be some point in time where I would feel like Bridge is inevitable. And now I'm sure that if a new employee joins Bridge, they feel like Bridge is inevitable, but I still don't feel that way. And it's like the difference between being like an employee and being a founder is like an employee, you can kind of live in like optimistic world and like do your job. As like a founder, you're like, thinking about what is the next existential thing that you have to overcome to make the business whatever it is that you think it needs to be.
How did you know that this was the right time, or how did you decide, to step off of this Stairmaster and to move on to Stripe's Stairmaster? How did you decide to make that choice that you wanted to get acquired?
Well, I mean, first off, I would say we didn't want to get acquired. I don't think that, generally speaking, I don't think that companies sell. I think that they get bought, at least good ones. And in this case, I very legitimately thought that our business was unacquirable. I just found it very hard to believe that we had such optimism about stablecoins and where this space could go, and it felt inconceivable that there was somebody else out there that shared that optimism and was large enough to invest behind that shared belief and had the tolerance to invest on the frontier of this next, big infrastructure improvement. And I just didn't think that there was anybody there, even Stripe. And so when I started spending time with John and Patrick, my whole intent was to try to get Stripe as a customer. And I tried many times to get them to sign a contract and buy our product, and they kept deferring. And then, and as I spent more time with them, it just became really clear that they shared this very similar view of how big and how important this space could become. And it also became very clear to me that doing this together made it much more likely that we would achieve a much, bigger combined outcome, and do so a lot faster. And this is been true even more so than I anticipated post-acquisition. I mean, the acquisition itself sort of kicked off and actually very much shifted the space along the adoption curve. And then with a bunch of the work that we've done and the products that we've shipped, it's sort of shown the world what's possible. We just launched this open issuance platform that we could have done as an independent company, but the types of businesses that would work with us would be very different if we were Bridge as a Series B startup versus Bridge as part of Stripe. So the thesis that it would move us, along the adoption curve and get our business farther much faster has very much proven out.
How has your life changed post-acquisition? And also, for Bridge itself, the sort of working style, the company culture, joining a bigger organization like Stripe?
Yeah.
Did they force you to drink a cheeky pint?
They did. They did. Yeah, they did. It was sort of like hazing. I would
to drink down to the G.
Yeah, we didn't do that because I think all of us would have been horrible at it. But I would say that the two things. So one is that I actually think it's day to day, it's harder to build Bridge as being part of Stripe than it is as being an independent business. Zooming into the micro day to day, because you have we're pretty independent. We have our own office and our own Slack, and if someone at Stripe wants to message me on Slack, they literally have to figure out a connection and then get them to introduce us. It's like anyone here messaging us on Slack. And we have our own Google Docs thing, and so it's hard to add people in Stripe, to our docs and vice versa. And things are over time; those will change. But we operate very independently. But we have all the things we need to do to scale our business. We have to go find bank partners, and we have to build a bunch of crypto infrastructure and build out wallet infrastructure, and we have our own roadmap and customers that we need to support. We have all those things, but then we also have all these other things we need to do. We need to somehow figure out how our CRM integrates with Stripe's CRM so that customers that reach out to us can we know who's on first base and who can work with them. And it's this whole series of additional work that complexifies the day. So day to day, it's probably harder, but big picture, there are these moments where things that we would be doing, Stripe just pours jet fuel on the business and accelerates us at a pace that would be completely impossible independently. And that was like our cards product when we launched it, and that's like, enterprise adoption that's coming now, or banks that we're now working with, or the issuance platform that we're working with, and so on. So day to day, it's like, it's just as stressful. I don't know what people, I thought it would certainly like, you kind of like relax or something, and that has definitely not been the case.
Okay, still on the Stairmaster.
Yeah.
Sean, so you founded Circle more than a decade ago, and you're now starting a new company in the AI age. How has your approach to company building changed between what you did then and what you're doing now with Catena?
Yeah, so a lot. So I'll tell you first what's not changed. What's actually been informative, in founding Circle. So Circle was the third company that Jeremy and I did together, and previously, companies were not in any heavily regulated industry of any kind, like finance or otherwise. And so we knew that going in. We kind of knew what we didn't know, and so made a heavy investment in educating regulators early on at the state and federal level, but also internationally. And there is a similar pattern there when it comes to optimizing AI workflows that touch money globally, and thinking through standards that may ultimately become written into law for AI safety, and how we think about the nation-state issues that have already emerged around sort of foundational element, sort of management. And so there is some pattern recognition there that is similar. I would say though, what is really different is the tactical formation of a company now is very different than it was 12 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And an example is, at Circle we have, a lot of risk analysts and compliance analysts who do amazing work, and they sit down at their terminals and they sort of, police for money laundering, maybe open cases, gather evidence, file SARs and the like. So we do the same, but we have AI agents execute that entire workflow, and we have a human that oversees that workflow and optimizes it. So it's a very different kind of role for the human, and they have to be very good at working with these AI workflows. But the tactical execution, the economics were very different, but also the execution, the operational sort of management is very different because we're incorporating sort of AI native approaches to all of these things.
From a pure headcount level, do you think you'll ever need to scale up to the size of having
flat out, no way. Yeah, I think the roles themselves will be very different. New roles will emerge that I probably don't know about, and so it turns out you really do need to still hire human beings. But the whether it's software, software development or marketing or compliance, as I mentioned, in every single area. It's not, Circle is what, a 1,200 person company. I cannot imagine the need to build a company at that scale now.
It's interesting you say that, like like in the early internet, people were saying like the internet has like changed everything, everything about the way people work and something, and it shows up everywhere except in GDP. And then like with AI now, it's kind of like AI is changing like everyone's productivity and so on. It's showing up in every stat except for hiring. Mm-hmm. And you certainly feel that in San Francisco. Like when we're trying to hire engineers in San Francisco, and it's like every engineer, it's like what has happened to demand for engineering is like it's gone hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think a lot of the, you can't just go out and vibe code a financial institution. So it does take some experienced engineers. But it is a different way of working as an engineer, as a principal, as an architect. It's a very different way of working and I think it will be taught differently in schools. And there's a time gap before it's taught differently where you worry about people who are going through universities and how they're being trained, because I think they're learning a lot of skills that are relevant in computer science now.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend they study instead then?
Drop out and build a business.
Humanities, poetry.
Go back to philosophy, poli-sci, English. No, it's a really good question. Not to be flippant about it, and I think it's a really hard question. And the generation that is going through universities now, I think, are facing a front and center. So,
yeah.
So I've got to ask before we wrap here, you both are working on new base layer chains, Arc in the case of Circle, and Tempo in the case of Stripe. Why does the world need a new base layer chain?
Or two.
Or two,
Yeah.
or many.
Yeah. I'll go first, and then curious to hear your thoughts. So we've been building payments, applications on blockchains for a couple years now. It was very clear to us from the beginning that blockchains were not optimized for this type of activity, and it manifests in in many small decisions and a few very big decisions. Like we were working with a very large neobank, millions and millions of customers. They wanted to build on a specific blockchain. In order to set up wallets for all their customers, they need to prime those wallets with a bunch of gas in order to enable them to accept USDC. The cost of doing that was going to cost this company millions of dollars just to enable their customers to have the opportunity to store USDC in these wallets. We were one of our very first customers. A separate use case was the government dispersing aid payments. And the first time we dispersed those aid payments, it was thousands of aid payments, which is not a lot of payments. It took us like 18 hours to send all of these transactions. And so there's just a bunch of small decisions that add up to make it very challenging for core payments use cases to exist. And then there's a few very big decisions. Like the big decisions are like, it's really nice that everything is public on a blockchain, but it's going to be very hard to get core financial institutions to have all their transactions be completely public by default. So there's some level of privacy that is desirable. You're going to want discrete payment lanes for transactions so that if something is happening in the blockchain, like what happened last 2 weeks ago with all the liquidations that happened, you had a huge spike in gas fees across like certain L2s and so on. You don't want that to happen if you're moving and using these blockchains to run like your core infrastructure to move money. So there's a bunch of these problems that we saw that we felt like needed to be solved. And we hope that Tempo is like an independent entity that's sort of building a blockchain to solve this problem. We hope that it solves the problem, but we're also happy if Arc solves this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think just laddering off of that, I mean, it's sort of you add up a lot of small things that you sort of look at the existing options when it comes to L1s or L2s. And you sort of don't find the right match for something that needs to be, sub 300 millis, settlement, like final settlement, privacy preserving, not competing with block space for like meme coins or whatever. If I send a wire through old school traditional rails, my bank doesn't say, wait, I'm going to process this TikTok video first, which is kind of the feeling when you're just trying to have a high throughput payment chain and you've got to deal with whatever else is going on. So you sort of add all of these things up. And some dedicated chain that can have things like gas fees being paid in the currency in which you're sending. So we built first on base in Solana, which I think is very common for a lot of people still. But our AI actors have to hold the right tokens to pay gas fees, and it's just simply more reliable and faster if we just don't have to do those things. So I think Tempo and Arc. I have to be careful what I say about Arc. I think that they're slightly different design centers.
Non-investment advice.
Non-investment advice. And I think they're slightly different takes, and there may be more takes. But it is really important in order to unlock some of these new use cases to be. We avoided this for the longest time, obviously, with USDC because platform neutrality is very important. We built first on Ethereum, but we immediately started entertaining other chains.
One of the things that's so great about this space is you have, a couple years ago, there was this desire to create blockchains that were, had higher throughput and much lower gas fees and were much more scalable. And then you saw this like creative process where you had L2s emerge, you had Solana emerge, you had Aptos, you had Sui, you had all these different folks come into the space to solve this problem. And then some of those have emerged and sort of become the winners, and it's great. That's like the creative process. And we're seeing the same thing now around these payments blockchains, where we have Tempo and we have Arc and there's Plasma and there's other independent entities that are coming out to solve this problem. And one or multiple of those will be successful, which will also be great.
Very, very, very briefly, one of the guiding lights of crypto, if it has a core philosophy, is decentralization. What would you say to somebody who is concerned that this could introduce centralization into the industry? Give me like your one sentence that you would say to somebody to persuade them that this is not something they should be concerned about.
My take is I don't think any of these blockchains will be successful if they're centralized. Like no one is going, a bank is not going to want to build its payment infrastructure on top of another bank's blockchain. And so the only way that Tempo or I think Arc will be successful is if they are truly decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, I think like fundamentally, we are saying it is better for us to trust our money to cryptography and software than it is to any one human being or one business that a human being creates. And so, the definition of decentralization versus distribution or a roadmap to getting there can all be sort of discussed, but it's a fundamental tenet. We can't just have, the corpo chain and expect the rest of the world to use that. So,
Crypto over corpo. All right. Well, Zach, Sean, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah. Thanks.